Good afternoon, everyone. This is Daniel from IoT Security. I am the Director of Technical Service Division of IoT Security. I am leading the team to perform the IoT and web application and mobile application security assessment. Today is very honored to be here to make the presentation about the IoT cybersecurity and IoT vulnerability. Okay, today I will make some short review about IoT product security and also let you know what kind of the latest international IoT cybersecurity requirement. Okay, the first of all is IoT product vulnerabilities. So according to the research, there are 50% IoT devices are currently vulnerable to medium or high severity attacks. It means if I am a hacker, I can use this vulnerability to make your device cannot work, or I can compromise your device to get a full control of your devices. I can get an image, I can control your device, I can change your settings. So it's a very critical issue. So there are 15% IoT devices are vulnerable. And for this vulnerability, so according to the research result, this IoT vulnerabilities cost more than 500,000 USD cost per month. Okay, let me see some real case. So, uh, for some IP cameras, so a lot of IP cameras, so sometimes they use the backdoor or their controller or they develop their own remote control protocol. So sometimes it exists some vulnerability. So for example, you can see the CVE to 2020 5735. It exists a remote authenticated state over buffer overflow. It means I am a hacker. I can use this vulnerability to exploit a buffer overflow attack and execute any code or command I want. So sometimes it running on some special TCP port. For example, in this case, the management service port running on 37777 TCP port, and sometimes due to this protocol is developed by the manufacturer itself. Sometimes it did not do any kind of the security check, so we can use this vulnerability to get a control to launch the buffer overflow attack or command injection to make your service crash, or I can get a control. And the other one, the real case, is about report 20 vulnerabilities. So report 20 is the well-known TCP/IP stack used by medical device, healthcare, or IoT and connected device. So if your product use the some TCP/IP stack, and maybe your device is vulnerable for report 20. So I am a hacker, I can use this report 20 vulnerabilities to control your device or to remote execute any system call or a command to get control your device. Okay, I also show you some simple way to how we find the real vulnerability so I can control your devices. And for example, sometimes I can find a input field on your web application or web GUI on your IoT devices. I can find the field, and sometimes I can input some mail phone data. For example, this is the time sent page. So in NTP server 1 field, I can use the normal data, and then I press the submit and intercept the packet I send. I change the data into some special system command. Then I pass this command to the system, and system will execute the command I give to the devices. Then I can ask the device to download the malware, download the backdoor, and execute. Then I can get the control of your device. Just easily connect to my backdoor. I can control your devices. And sometimes if your device is developed by Android platform, and sometimes an Android platform they have their ADB shell and running on TCP 5555. So sometimes you just easy to use the ADB tool and connect to the TCP 5555. Then you can get the Android shell. Then you can sometimes you can get a root the privilege, or sometimes you can get a access control of these devices. And a lot of the open source used by IoT devices because for some protocol or for some service like SSH, UPnP, DNS service, the developer will not try to build their network application. So they will download the open source. For example, the DNS Mesh Square, like HTTPD, they are quite famous open source used by IoT devices. But if you use the out of date open source library, sometimes for this open source library are vulnerable. So if you use the vulnerable open source library, it means your device also vulnerable for this vulnerability. So for example, for the DNS square, they have the vulnerability code CV 2017 and 15107. If you use this DNS square open library, use this version, vulnerable version, and your devices will be vulnerable for this vulnerability. So I am a hacker, I can check what kind of open source what you use. I can use this vulnerability to attack your device. Sometimes I can make your device cannot work, or I can get a control of your devices. And for IoT device hacking, and we can touch the device. We can physical touch the device. So I can disassemble your product, open the case, try to find some spatial debug interface. For example, for IoT device, sometimes they will have the UART interface or JTAG I2C. For the security researcher, we will try to identify what kind of debug interface used by this device. Or sometimes I can get information or get a system shell through the UART, JTAG, or I2C. And sometimes we can do the further attack for the hardware interface. So we can try to dump your flash memory just like your hardware. We can use some tool to desolder your flash memory, and we can use the flash memory reader to dump all the flash memory data, and we can get everything inside your product for just like the certification, your private key, your old binary file, everything in your product. I can use this way to dump your data. Okay, so for our security, we use a different way to try to get the information to get the data from your devices. Or sometimes we can just we don't have a device, we still can find some vulnerability. So for example, due to your device need to support a product update, so they will they will use the firmware to let you update your devices. Sometimes some manufacturer will try to protect their firmware binary file, the firmware image file. So sometimes they just use the easy way or a simple way. For example, in this case, they just use the OpenSSL and encrypt the firmware binary file by AES algorithm. So we can use some reverse engineering to find the the encryption password. For example, they use OpenSSL and the password is password. So we can finally use the weak and vulnerable way to protect their firmware image file. So we can use the same way to decrypt the firmware file and put something, put a malware or backdoor into the firmware file, and repack this firmware file, use the same password. Then we can distribute this malicious firmware file, firmware image to other one, and then some user will update the firmware by our malicious firmware image file. Okay, so we see a lot of the different kind of IoT vulnerabilities. So actually, more and more organization, enterprise, and government they notice about IoT product security because the more and more IoT devices. For example, the Mirai malware they use the, the IoT devices to conduct the attack to perform the DDoS attack. So maybe in the past 6 or 10 years ago, not too many IoT devices for the cybersecurity for this connected or network devices is nice to have. Okay, you have the security assessment. You did the assessment. Okay, it is good to have that, but it is not mandatory. But for the 2020, I think this is a must-have. It's a mandatory requirement to perform the cybersecurity assessment for IoT devices because it will try to protect your IoT devices. It also to keep your device secure and you can protect the privacy data or users data on your IoT devices. And more government they have their own cybersecurity requirement. And for some organization like the big global buyer like Huawei, Vodafone, Amazon, T-Mobile, I think for this kind of major telecom carrier, they always have their own security requirement to ask the OEM or ODM to fulfill their cybersecurity requirement because uh, if the manufacturer they leave their devices is the vulnerability and they use the someone's logo, it will damage the reputation of this brand global buyer. So this global buyer always asks OEM and ODM have to follow their security requirement. You should pass the security testing. Okay, then you will complete the shipping process. And for some government, they also have their regulation. Like in United States, California have their own regulation called SB 327. It's about information privacy for connected devices, and they also have some IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act and IoT Consumer Tips Act of FTC. Okay, for the in United States, I think the SB 327 is quite famous in 2020 because it affected by this January 1st, and all the manufacturers of a connected device they have to equip the reasonable security feature on your devices. I think the most important one is all the devices. If you have the authentication outside the local area network, you should use the different unique the password for each devices, or you have to ask the user to generate or reconfigure a new password for their login interface. So it means for each IoT device, they will have different unique the password to log into their interface because for the IoT Mirai attack, the malware, they use the telnet to use the hardcore account and password and use the telnet to log into the system and download the malware and try to spread to another devices. So for SB327, they ask all the manufacturers should use the unique login password for each device, or you have to ask the user to change the password after they first log into the devices. And in Europe, they also have the new standard called EN 303 645. That is a new IoT consumer IoT cybersecurity standard. So you can see a more and more regulation or standard appears to ask the IoT device you should use reasonable IoT feature to protect your device and users' data and users' privacy. And also in Japan, they also have IoT security report to suggest all the IoT manufacturers should follow their countermeasure. You should use this way to protect your IoT device. For example, just like I mentioned, as SB327, you have to use the different password, or you have to check your open source library is the latest and there is no known vulnerability in this your IoT devices. Okay, and for the Amazon, and Amazon have their program called Alexa. So Alexa, uh, every device can connect to the Alexa service, and Alexa service will connect to. You just say something to Alexa devices like Echo or any kind of Alexa compatible devices. You can say something, and the Alexa service will try to do something for you. But for the Amazon view, they open the Alexa service, so a lot of manufacturers can use our Alexa service, but your device, your product need to pass the all the testing assigned by Amazon Alexa team. So there are 5 different kind of testing, and one of them is cybersecurity testing. So for the security testing, Amazon will ask you to find the authorized security testing lab, and there are totally only 6 authorized security lab authorized by Amazon Alexa team, and our security is one of them. So we can perform the Amazon Alexa security testing for our customers to help them to fulfill the requirement by Amazon Alexa. Okay, for the Amazon Alexa security requirements, so we can just simply divide into 6 different categories. The first one is about the connection. Every IoT device has a connection. Sometimes they use a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi, so the device need a connection to connect to the Alexa cloud. So the Amazon have the requirement about the connection. You have to use the security OS connection, and you should equip the anti-man-in-middle attack. The way to prevent a man-in-middle attack. And for the Bluetooth device, you should use the secure pairing mechanism. And for every authentication interface, you have to enforce to change the default password, and you cannot use any kind of the backdoor account inside your products. And for the software, you should prevent using the vulnerable library. Just like I mentioned, if you use the open source library, you have to make sure the open source library you use is the latest. There is no vulnerability, CV vulnerability inside your product. And you have to also remove the unnecessary node device for every input string and data. You need to do the validate to to prevent the buffer overflow, commit injection, sequence injection, and cross-site scripting. This kind of input validation vulnerability. And for the firmware file, for each device, it has to support the firmware update mechanism. Besides, you also need to ensure during the firmware update, the device should have the capability to ensure the integrity and source of the firmware update is trusted. It cannot be attacked by someone. And for the hardware, so every hardware you use the hardware microphone control that you can mute the device, and you have to remove all the hardware debug interface. And there are quite many technical security requirements, but I think the most important is they have the one special requirement is about the software maintenance and instant response. Okay, in past years, I see a lot of security requirement. They always list all the technical issue. You should prevent some attack. You should use some way to fulfill requirement. But most requirements are related to the technical issue. But for Alexa, they also have a software maintenance requirement. So it means you have to uh, declares you have the procedure you to handle the vulnerability. If someone find a vulnerability on your devices, you should have the contact window. You should have the public website so that someone can contact you and send you the vulnerability information to you. Then your developer, your R&D will try to duplicate or reproduce this issue and fix them. After that, after you fix the vulnerability, you should release the firmware file, new firmware image file through the OTA or any other way to let your user, your buyer, can use this new firmware to fix the vulnerability. Because Amazon believes there is no 100% secure devices. So you have to use this software maintenance procedure to make sure your device is secure. Okay. And there is also another one program called CTI. They also have their own IoT cybersecurity program. So you can use their test plan to ask the testing laboratory to perform the testing, then you can get a certificate. And our security also the first one in Asia. So we are the CTI authorized IoT cybersecurity laboratory, so we can perform the security testing for the CTI IoT cybersecurity. Okay, there are three different kind of level security, so you can choose which level you want to get a certification. And there is a new alliance called IOXT. And for IOXT, they want to build the confidence in IoT products. So they also have their own test plan for the IoT product security. So they can divide into three big category called security, and you need to also support the upgradability and transparency. So for these three major category can divide into uh, a testing type for the no universal password, secure interface, proven cryptography, security by default. You should use a signed software update, automated apply update, and then vulnerability reporting program and security expiration date. So you can see for the IOXT, they have this similar to the Amazon requirement and the CTIA. So more and more industrial requirement are similar. For example, they ask you to use the unique the password, or you also have to support the firmware update mechanism. And for the update, you need to use the signed software update to prevent someone use the malicious or fake firmware image file to get a control. So you need to use the digital certification to to ensure the integrity and source of this firmware file. Okay, and more security requirement from a global buyer or industry or the governments or regulation. So what kind of solution provided by onward security? Okay, sometimes the customer need the tool to perform a self-check. So onward security, we have our own developed tool called Sec Device and SecFlow. Okay, for these two devices, you can easier to help your QA team to perform the security assessment yourself, and SecFlow can help you to collect the vulnerable information from internet. And SecFlow also support the firmware image binary scan file. You can just need to upload your firmware image file. Our SecFlow can enumerate what kind of open source library you use and the version of this open source library. We will check with the National Vulnerability Database to see any kind of any CVE vulnerability exists in this firmware image file. And SecDevice can integrate the host scanning, web application scanning, and fuzzing test. So you can for the people, for the QA team, you can use our web interface to easier to set up the projects, to start the scanning and check the scanning result by our SEC devices. And sometimes you will be asked to entrust someone or third-party company like our security perform the security testing. And our security, we can perform the security assessment and certification testing by our ISO 17025 accredited cybersecurity testing laboratory. And for some the IoT brand manufacturer, they want to build their product security program, and our consultant team, we can help you according to the international standard to build your product security program. So we have a professional and experienced consultant team, and we also can get you help your team to introduce the DevSecOps to get the IEC 2443 certification. So for our security, we provide a one-stop solution. So we provide a simple way and secure and economic way to help our customers. So we have a compliance service, so we can, according to your requirement, to introduce and build a security program from ISO 271 or IEC C2443 or GDPR or something, any kind of security standard. And we also provide a security assessment service, so we can conduct the security testing by our ISO 17025 testing laboratory, and the security product developed by our security. So for this product can help you to save a lot of money and use easier, friendly interface to perform the security testing. Okay, so for compliance, so our consulting team can, according to your requirement, to perform the gap analysis between your current situation and the standard you want to use. And our consulting team will evaluate and help you to build a system. And then we will cooperate with some certification body to perform the external audit and help you to get a certification. And for our assessment service, so we can do any kind of security assessment for the automotive or radio frequency. So in 2 years ago, we also have an IoT security research paper published by Kobulu 2018. Okay, and we also can to perform the certification testing, just like the Amazon Alexa, the CTIA, or in Taiwan, we also support you can conduct the security testing for the mobile applications, smartphone, video surveillance, and smart bus. Then we can, according to the Taiwan government, to issue a certification to your products. Okay. Okay. Not only for Taiwan local standard. In the near future, we will try to be the certification laboratory to perform the FIPS, the cryptography algorithm and the module certification, and IEC 62443 and ISO 15408, the common criteria. I think in the near future, maybe next year, we can provide this kind of international security certification testing for our customer. And for the security products, as I mentioned, we have a SecFlow. We can get everything, every vulnerable information you need from internet, and we can also help you to find a potential vulnerability inside your product. So for these two devices can help your RD, R&D, and PM and security team to support them for the cybersecurity activities. For the SecFlow, we can use the SecFlow to get the information from internet, or you can use our SecFlow to search any kind of open source you use is vulnerable or not. And recently we have a big major update for our SecFlow. You also can support the firmware update. So firmware binary scan. So you just only upload your firmware binary file. You don't need to give me your source code. We can identify which open source library you use in your product and its version, and we will compare to the national vulnerability database to identify any kind of any known vulnerability exists in your products. And for the SEC device, we can support the vulnerability scan for your operating system and network service, and we also support the web application scanning. So if your device, your product support web application, web GUI, so we can auto log into your device and scan any kind of application vulnerability inside your uh, product. And we also support the fuzzing test. We can generate a lot of different kind of the fuzzing pattern to perform the fuzzing test. We will send the mail phone data or send a mail phone packet to your devices, and we will monitor your status of a device. Sometimes we just easily send one packet to your devices and your device will crash. Okay, it means it is the vulnerability. So the SEC device also support the fuzzing test. Okay, so the SEC device is integrated devices solution. We can provide a host scanning, web application scanning, and fuzzing test, and we use the web application to let the people can easier use our product. Only 3 steps can start testing and check our testing results. Okay, I think for the onward security, so we can help our customer to meet the security requirement from internal. Maybe sometimes your manager want to improve your product quality or to fulfill the buyer requirement or some government compliance. I think our security can help our customer and all manufacturer to meet this requirement. Okay, thank you everyone. Hope you like our presentation. If you have any questions, so you can drop in a mail from our website, and we will contact you after the conference. Okay, thank you everyone. Bye bye.